Welcome everyone to another demo series. Today we'll be discussing reporting segmentation. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Allison Steinberg and I'm the Assistant Director of Slate Communications, and I've been with Carnegie for about 4.5 years. Prior to working at Carnegie, I worked in admissions and was a Slate captain for a mid-sized liberal arts school. And my persona is a sophisticated and curious ambassador. For today's goal, we will learn how to enhance your reports with the Group by Export feature and the output tools of concatenate and coalesce in the reporting module. This will allow you to see more granular information about your aggregate data within a report. To achieve this goal, we're going to review the basics of the Group by Export tool, use the coalesce and concatenate outputs within a subquery export, and use multiple types of exports to display deeper granular data. To get us started, let's dive into Slate. To first demonstrate, we're going to add an export into our desired report and segmentation. So first we're going to start in this funnel and conversions report, and we're going to go into edit the report, and we're going to go into the report part in which we want to add this segmentation. So I'm going to go into this first part here. And we're going to go directly into the row in which we want that data to appear. So primarily, we're going to be working with this Group by Exports feature right here for the majority of today's conversation. So let's say as I'm looking at a funnel report, of course, I can see how my students are moving from prospect all the way up to deposited student, but I want to see the breakdown of what majors those students are interested in. To do that, I simply just add an export to this Group by Exports section of the report part or the report row and type in the value that I want to display. So here I'm going to select the field of major and save. And then I'll go back out to the report and wait for it to load. Once it loads, I'm going to be able to see the breakdown of all of the different majors that we have and how many prospects, inquiries, submitted applications we have students in each of those areas. So while this is really, really nice to look at, you might be thinking, well, I don't need to see my major breakdown all of the time. For the most part, I want to see my overall totals, but having that data there is super helpful. Well, there's two different ways we can set up the report to work that way. So we're going to go back into edit the report, back into that part, and back into that row. So the first way we're going to show to do this is by adding a literal. To add a literal, we just select this little icon here that it looks like a text box with a T in it. And we just give a title to what we want that overall row to be. So I'm going to call this totals. That way I'm seeing the totals of my prospects, my inquiries, my submitted applications. If I hit save here, make sure that export appears before your more granular data export, so major in this case. And we're going to hit save. And we go back out to the report. Once the report loads here, we're going to see that totals row, which shows us our total prospects, inquiries, submitted applications for the terms that we've pre-selected. But now you'll see that this row highlights when you hover over it. And what that means is it's now clickable. So when I click into this, it's now going to drill down and show me all of the majors. So I am able to see those totals separately, or I can see more granular information. Another way we can display this is by just adding a less granular export prior to the more granular one. So for example, what we're exporting in this funnel report is all of our undergraduate students. But we can get a little bit more granular than that and say, what is the student type of those undergraduate students before we look at their major? So I'm going to delete this literal. And instead, I'm going to export student type. So when I click on that export, I want to make sure that that one is appearing first before major. I'm going to hit save on that. And then I'm going to go back out and let that load. And once that loads, I'm now going to be able to see my student type, and then I can click into each student type and be able to see the more granular breakdown of their majors. So this is a really nice way to just You don't have to add a separate row for each major or a separate report part for each major. You can just simply add the desired export and Slate will do it for you. So you may be thinking, well, this is a small amount of majors. My school has 100 majors, 150 majors, and you might want to see all of those majors, but maybe you don't need to see all of those majors. Maybe you just want to keep an eye on what your top 10 majors are or your top 25 majors. Well, we can easily make that happen. So if we go back in to edit the report, double click into it, go back to the same location. If we go into the major export specifically, we will see that we have an option to limit how many of the exports will actually show, or the values, the prompts within that export. So here, we're just going to show our top 5. So I'm just going to write in my desired number here. And then we have to select 2 other things, these 2 other settings right above it. So we have to say which column of our report do we want this data to be sorted by, because obviously your order could change depending on whether you're looking at submitted apps, inquiries, prospects. So let's say we want to know how many or what are our top majors for our submitted applications for this year. I will then select that specific row. And since I'm seeing the top majors and not the smallest to the largest, we're going to have to select descending. So if I hit save on this and go back out to the top level of the report, take a second to let it load. And now when I click into this, you can see that's only showing 5 majors, which I've pre-selected, and it's sorting them in order from highest to lowest based off of the fall 25 submitted applications column. So this is really, really helpful to see, allows you to keep an eye on the majors that students are most interested in, where you're getting the most applications. And it's a really, really nice way to enhance your reports. All right, so let's take this a step further and we're gonna go back into edit this report. But this time we're gonna use the coalesce output feature within a subquery export. And the reason we're gonna do this is you might be thinking, well, on my inquiry forms, I have a person scoped major, but on my application, I have an application scoped major. And in theory, what a student selected on an inquiry form could be different from when they apply. So you might want to display, once someone is an applicant, what is their application major? And if they have not applied yet, what is their person scoped major? So let's just start from scratch here and delete these 2 exports. To do this, we're going to click the subquery export tool here. Just going to give this a name. So we're still going to call it major because it's still going to just export one of your major values, but we're just telling Slate which major to export depending on whether or not the value exists. So we're going to select the coalesce feature here. And with the coalesce, it kind of works like an exclusivity group where it's going to select if one thing exists or if a student meets the criteria for something, have this happen. And if that doesn't apply, then let's skip to the next thing. So to do this, we're going to join to our applications. That way we can get our application scoped major. And we're going to export both the application scoped major and the person scoped major. So for each individual student, if they have a value in the application major field, Slate will export that value. If they do not, it will then default to the next value that is exported, so that person scoped major. So if I hit save on this, save again, and go back out, this is going to look exactly the same as what we first demonstrated. But now you know that if someone applied as biology, that's counting their application major and you're not counting them maybe as chemistry if that's what they had written when they inquired. So you can just get a little bit more specific there in what you're actually displaying. All right, so now that we know the basics of how the group by export feature works and we've used the concatenate export, let's try we used the coalesce export. This time we're going to use the concatenate export. So to do this, I'm actually going to switch over to a different type of report. Here we have a campaign performance report. So this top report row right here is showing our email engagements for a specific campaign. So we pre-selected a folder that contains multiple emails in a campaign. But we might want to know more granularly, how is each email within the campaign performing, opposed to just looking at the campaign overall. So to do that, we're going to go into edit this report. Again, we're going to go into the report part where we want to add that data, and again into the row. So similar place that you're going, same setup. Once we're here, we're going to select the subquery export button again. And this time, instead of using the output of coalesce, we're going to use the output of concatenate. So what concatenate does is it takes two separate exports and essentially merges them into one. So you're seeing multiple types of information within one row. So for this, we want to export the name of the email. That way we know which email we're looking at. Another helpful thing to see at a glance for an email report specifically is the topic of the email. And the way that we do that at Carnegie is we utilize our UTM term to display what the topic of the email is. So that is going to be our second export. So we're going to join to the message mailing base, and then we're going to export the name of the mailing and the UTM term. So if I hit save on this, we will now see each individual email within the campaign exporting, as well as that topic. So our UTM term for email number 1 is intro. For email number 2, it is form. And for email number 3, it is apply. But as you can see, this all smushed together into one long word that's very challenging to read. Well, we can tell Slate to not do that. So we're going to go back into our export. And we're going to utilize this export separator to make sure that there is a distinction between these two values. So you can do this by just adding a space. If you just want a space to separate those words, you can use a dash, a slash, but I like to use a pipe. So I'm going to do a space, a pipe, and then another space. We're going to hit save on that, save again. And now you can see that that data is all exporting into that one row, but we have clear distinction. It's easy to read, and we can get that more granular information about our campaign overall, and just make this report much more valuable to use. So another thing we can do here is we can add multiple layers of exports. So if we go back into here, maybe we're wanting to know how students are performing within our campaign based off of where they live. So I'm going to add an additional subquery export. I'm going to join to the person base, and I'm also going to join to the address, rank 1 address base. So we're going to do that here. And I am going to export the region in which the students live. So we're just going to title this state, hit save. So now when I go back out into my report and I click on the row, I can now see of the students that are receiving these emails, what states they live in, and I can see how they're performing. So very much like what we did with the major field, if we only want to see maybe the top 10 states, we can limit that just like we did with majors and say which column we want that to be organized by. One other thing you could do is maybe you just want to see in-state versus out-of-state. You don't necessarily care which state, you just want to know, are they living in the state in which our school is located, or are they not? So as you saw in that example, we had an export of New Jersey and North Carolina. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a subquery export for an existence value. And I'm going to join in to that address base again. And we're going to filter by the state. So of New Jersey. So if they live in New Jersey, we're going to say if the value exists, we want to call them an in-state student, and the value it does not exist, we're going to call them an out-of-state student. And we can just call this state or location, whatever makes the most sense to you. Hit save. And then when I go back out to the report and I click into my row, I can now just see, okay, of the students who are receiving these emails, are my in-state students engaging more with the email than the out-of-state students? So as you can see, adding segmentation, aka the group by exports to your reports, can provide you with a lot of additional granular information about the population of students you're looking at without having to create a separate report part or a whole separate report for each subgroup. There are many different data points that you can add to your reports just based off of the information that is highest importance to you and your team. But this allows you to just have a lot more flexibility with your reporting. So thank you for joining me today for our demo series. And if you have any questions, reach out to us at carnegiehighered.com.